I hate to start a video off so cliche, but the year was 1997. And the 64-bit successor to the Super Nintendo's technological darling Starwing was finally released upon the world, and it was causing everyone's hands to feel these tactile thrills usually reserved for under the sheets. But I wasn't fully aware of that. At the time, I was 3 years old, and my memories of this time kind of blur together. If I go back to the deepest reaches of my mind, then there's times where I first played Game Boy, and then the next set of memories are my time with my Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, and PlayStation all hooked up at once. It was a mess of cables. And Lylat Wars, the game I'm talking about, kinda, is one of those games unfortunately lumped in with the, well, we always had this game mindset. My foundational memories of getting video games for the first time didn't hit until a couple years later when the millennium was wrapping up. So as a young child, this game, with a huge hype cycle that even caused Sega and Sony to torture Mario, is just something that existed since time immemorial. And I wouldn't even learn of its predecessor until like a decade later. And the game's core gimmick, this rumble, wasn't even something I knew of since my parents weren't big on wasting AA batteries for a rumble pack. And honestly, to skip ahead, I never experienced the Nintendo 64 rumble until the Nintendo Switch Online. I'd say I was deprived, but I had a Super Nintendo, a Game Boy, a PlayStation, and Nintendo 64 at this period, so I'll take the small loss here. For the record, I had lots of older brothers, that's the reason we had all this. And I don't know if you've ever played a game like Lylat Wars as a young child, still coming to terms with basic motor functions, let alone controlling a character who won't stop moving forward in a 3D space, but this was more tricky than racing a Triceratops. I've talked a lot in some videos about the thrill of getting better at a game through repetition, but no game has been as important to me in this field as this. Because I was starting it as a kid too young for school, who could never even dream of seeing most of his game's levels. I never even saw the iconic Sector Z until I played Smash Bros, a game I only used Fox in because he was my hyperfixation, despite me being terrible at this game. And for the records, Super Smash Bros is one of those games I remember getting for the first time. But it was months after this until I learnt how to defeat Andross on his home base of Venom. And I was thrilled, only to be instantly deflated by my older brothers who revealed that I got the bad ending where Andross still lives. It'd be years later until I got to properly defeat Andross, a feat that I first experienced via computer emulation and keyboard controls as a 13-year-old in 2007. I miss the good old days of games, which coincidentally happened to be when I was younger and first got into them. What a coincidence, I bet no one else has had a similar experience. But for years, most of my teenage years in fact, I religiously played Lylat Wars, and even discovered that most of the world knew it as Star Fox 64, that's a weird name. And not only did I finally get to see some levels like Aquas and Zonus, and not only did I get every medal, but during this teenage hyperfixation, I got every medal on Expert mode. Once again, with a terrible laptop keyboard. It's safe to say that as a 16-year-old, there was no game in the world that I was better at than Star Fox 64. And I was much better at it than I am now because I've fallen out of practice. All this footage you're looking at now is me a decade over my peak. This is my atrophy. In hindsight, I wish I recorded my playthroughs back then. Words can't describe the level of excitement I got when I found out that this game was going to receive a remake for the upcoming Nintendo 3DS. I'd watched the gameplay footage repeatedly, and I got a 3DS early just so I could get this game day one. And when Nintendo released 3D screenshots of this game that you could download onto your 3DS and view in 3D, I got them all. I was in awe. The graphics were beautiful, the gameplay looked the same, and it was almost mine. To most of you, this sounds ridiculous. Star Fox 64 is a game that you remember fondly, but it never strikes as feverishly with anyone else. And I can't help it, I have a condition. I even went to my local EB Games the minute they opened, picked up my pre-ordered copy, and not only immediately booted it up while walking out of the store, I completed a hard route run while my best friend at the time and I were meant to be hanging out at the mall, and I was admittedly not giving him the attention he deserved. I've never been professionally diagnosed, but we all know what's going on. So what is this game that made me explain my entire life story? Well, let's take a deep dive to find out. Star Fox 64, and by extension the 3DS Remake, might be my all-time favourite video game that isn't a part of the Hitman series. That's an odd qualifier, but you guys aren't ready for the level of info dumping attached to that series if I cover it. But I have a couple quick things to get out of my way. My footage is poorly captured for my own 3DS. I'd emulate this game, but this game hates emulators and causes bizarre glitches, and I just don't want to deal with those. Also, this is a very faithful remake, so a lot of what I will say will carry over to the Nintendo 64 release as well. Oh, thank you Rob64. Anyway, back onto another tangent. This game is both a gameplay sequel to the original Star Fox, a game I called Gyrowing earlier, and it's also a remake of it, but it was also a way to use the ideas of the unreleased Star Fox 2, so now I need to talk about both of these. Especially since Dylan Cuthbert was a programmer for the first two Star Fox games, and he came back as a director for this 3DS remake. His only other Star Fox credit was Command, which I'll tackle someday on this channel. Though Dylan's role actually dates back even further than the first Star Fox game. He was the designer and programmer for a Game Boy game called X. It's this 3D space combat game, and it's actually a technological marvel. This was Nintendo's first foray into 3D gaming, and Dylan made an amazing engine. And this led to Nintendo picking him out and recruiting him for some game that they were working on, which would eventually become Star Fox. The original game is very thin on plot, though the manual elucidates the more important details as you'd expect at the time. In the fictional Lylat star system, a planet named Corneria was home to Andros, a scientist who did dangerous experiments that endangered people. The Cornerian government had no choice but to exile him. But years have passed since then, and he's leading an invasion on the Lylat system from his new home of the planet Venom. The Cornerian army has hired the 4-person mercenary team of Star Fox to reach Venom and defeat this threat. The Star Fox team consists of Fox, Peppy Hare, Slippy Toad, and Falco. I'm sure you can figure out what animals they're all meant to be. And the gameplay behind this simple story is also deceptively simple, but the fact that the Super Nintendo is able to achieve it is still a feather in its cap. The levels are constant hallways that we are always moving forward through, similar to a rail shooter, though our ship, the R-Wing, can move up, down, left and right all over the screen. We can also temporarily slow down or boost our speed, but those maneuvers are tied to a refilling meter. We're always tunneling down these linear maps, and our objective is to shoot as many enemies as we can, save our squad mates whenever they need it, and then defeat the level boss, which is usually just a big guy with glowing weak spots. And this game controls like a dream with 4 controller button configurations, though it's really 2 button remaps, and then options for if we want standard or flight controls with the D-pad, meaning up is down, down is up, you know. This is a great option to have that almost every Star Fox game going forward would adopt, so everyone gets what they want. And this game is simple arcade fun, though it had room to improve. For starters, the frame rate isn't ideal, and that's me saying it. I'm the person who didn't even have an issue with Jak and Daxter on a Vita, but I'm still thinking this about Star Fox. Also, the limited art here didn't do justice to these beautiful landscapes that the manual had to bring to life. And just from a gameplay loop, outside of some hidden warps that shake up the formula, the biggest decision you make is at the very beginning of the game. Which of the 3 routes will you pick? Make your decision now at the very start, and you're stuck with it until the end. This is still a great thing for replayability. More games could do with this approach, but well, as someone who started with Star Fox 64, my future knowledge taints the otherwise amazing Star Fox. All this game really needed was a few small refinements, so that's why Star Fox 2 abandoned most of its game's ideas and ran in a completely different direction. But it's one I happen to still adore, and it is my preferred game of this SNES duology, but I'll ignore most of what it has to offer here until I eventually do a video on Star Fox Command. I just want to focus on the new additions here that carried over into the Nintendo 64 entry. First of all, this game traded away hallway levels for something called All Range Mode. These levels are basically a big square map that you can fly around in, but you can go in any direction, you're not just pushed ahead. And in addition to non-linear open levels, it gives us dogfights with this new enemy team called Star Wolf, who are here to strike us down in their functionally identical ships. It's a classic example of fighting your shadow self, or more simply, just a dude who can do everything we can. It was a much needed addition to this series, and in hindsight it's weird to think the first game didn't even have this. Our R-Wings can also do charge shots, which is super devastating, and helps liven things up more than just our regular laser and bomb combo. However, Star Fox 2 didn't see a release at this time, so from an audience perspective, these new features wouldn't even be known about until the Nintendo 64 game hit. So now is the part of the video where I talk about the game I'm meant to be covering. Star Fox 64 took ideas from both these predecessors and combined them into a near-perfect mix. I said near-perfect because Star Fox 2 added some cool as hell women to the squad, and they were axed here so we could get a reboot of the first game again. Fans of GameCube games will parrot the same thing when Star Fox Zero graced us, but at the risk of upsetting them, I don't mourn Crystal. She got 3 games, whereas Mia and Faye only got 1, and it's a game that only officially came out a few years ago, and beforehand was just an incomplete ROM. Faye deserves better. Anyway, they removed politics from this game about war and just left the boys here of Team Star Fox to redo the original story against Andros. Though some extra layers were added to this story, and it's beautifully narrated to us by a man with a sexy voice, so we don't even need a manual anymore.
Corneria, 4th planet of the Lylat system.
We are the second iteration of Team Star Fox. Originally it consisted of James McCloud, who was Fox's father, Pigma Dengar, who betrayed the team and would join Team Starwolf, and Peppy Hare, which means he's an old man, but he's still here with us now in this current group. But he's not the leader of Team Star Fox despite all this experience, because we have Fox as a Nepo baby now. Here on 3DS, before we start the action, we have a mandatory tutorial, which frankly sucks, but it's over quickly. This is the same tutorial that was an optional training mode on Nintendo 64, and I strongly prefer it that way. This game itself is already basically perfect at teaching every mechanic just through playing, and more importantly, everything Peppy tells you to do. It feels a little reductive to have a squad mate whose entire purpose here is teaching you maneuvers, but you can't listen to them until you've already gone through a mandatory tutorial that teaches you all the same stuff. This is one of the biggest grievances I have with this remake, and it's something you'll never run into on replays. I even frankly forgot it was part of this game until I tried capturing footage from a clean save file. Also, it's worth noting that the tutorial guy now has a sensual voice, though on N64 he just spoke in Lylat language, which is bleeps and bloops.
Hold the L or R button while turning to move left or right quickly.
And I still can't get used to his new English voice.
Press the Y button again to detonate it.
Also, just while I'm complaining about this tutorial, I also find it funny because Miyamoto was quoted in Star Fox 64 interviews back in the day as saying, "I think the first 30 minutes of a game is the most important. It's the producer's job to make sure that it's exciting." And you know, this game isn't his baby anymore, and people's opinions are subject to change over years. I just find it particularly funny that a game that was first created to have a really strong opening has been remade with one that's largely unnecessary and actually makes the opening minutes a lot less fun. Thankfully things pick up, and like I said, this will never happen on replays. And while I'm being a bit of a downer, the beginning also introduces one of my favourite additions to the 3DS remakes. We get to choose our controls from 4 different options total, with flight controls being an optional thing. It's just like the SNES game again. I have to state that because the Nintendo 64 version, for some reason, didn't include this and locked everyone to flight controls, which I can get used to and clearly have with my thousands of hours, but I like to disable it in every game where I can. And it's weird because during development of the original 64 version, this game did seem to have different options that could be toggled, but it was removed during development so they could standardize everything. Well, that sucks. And thanks to the 3DS having a D-pad that is reachable while playing normally, some actions have been mapped to it for convenience. Because before that, you had to use a particular C button and the stick in tandem. Traditionalists can still do that with the circle pad and buttons if they want, but they don't have to anymore. The controls here are a dream and fit the 3DS like a glove. The only downside is we've removed the totally optional first-person aim that almost no one used on N64 because of its weird implementation, but I still miss it. The series feels wrong to me without the option for first person, and it was even used really well for the first two games. But instead of fixing what the N64 attempted, it was scrapped outright. I know the tight claustrophobic view where you didn't actually get to see much of the screen wasn't for everyone's cup of tea, but it made for some fun challenges. Even though it was clearly some kind of afterthought because it didn't work in all range mode or any of the non-R-Wing levels. But like I said, instead of fixing and polishing what they had, it was just scrapped completely. I wouldn't be so mad, but the same year that the 3DS version came out, we also got a 3DS Mario Kart with first person. Don't take it away from a series and add it to another one. You can't do that, Nintendo. Perhaps it was removed here because the bottom screen of the 3DS is trying to recreate some of a cockpit view here. We have an in-universe display that shows us all the talking heads, and this used to take up precious screen real estate before, so this is a nice change. And when it's not doing that, it states out R-Wing's laser and wing conditions. The latter info is definitely not needed, but it is nice to have some screen filler during the quiet moments. And beneath all that, we get a clock which shows us what time it is, and an active status on the 3DS battery, which are both amazing additions for a game that you can lose hours in. Control-wise, we also get Miyamoto's requested gyro controls. And I usually love gyro controls, I use them in like everything I can. I even love Star Fox Zero, which is all about it. But here on 3DS, I've never really bothered to use them outside the testing I did for footage. It's partially because you can only use it in the newly added easier difficulty mode here, which I never played with. But it's also funny because it doesn't really add much to my ability to shoot things accurately. It's just kind of a fun novelty, and for what it is, it's done quite well. Dylan Cuthbert and the team at Q Games made it in the last minute, basically in 2 days, and that's incredible for how well it's done. But it's an option that I wouldn't recommend to most, especially since the main mode of a game and the unlockable expert mode don't even let you use it. And if you want to play the easier difficulty here, you don't even have to use gyro, it's an option just for that difficulty few people will use. Now speaking of all that, all my footage is from expert mode, which is why I don't often have the blue hyper lasers. This mode takes off your wings every time you collide with a single enemy or obstacle, and it's a pain, but it's my pain. It's the only way I've played this game in the last 15 years, outside of having to re-unlock the mode whenever I play it on a fresh save. Before we start the game, I do have to bring up that this game has removed the Lylat language as a voice option. It was just the classic garbled bleeps and bloops to sort of recreate an alien language. And it was an extra just in the PAL game named Lylat Wars. This remake would have been a great time to standardize it, but nah, they scrapped it. But back onto the game itself, Corneria. Our opening level serves as a microcosm of the entire game, and while I'm frankly never in the mood to just play it, this is the perfect first level for a game like this. Shame the remake shot itself in the foot with that tutorial, huh? This is a safe corridor level with lots of enemy variety, archers just begging to be flown through, and teammates almost dying and you having to boost to reach them. It has both the most welcoming appearance with its scenic nature and city aesthetics blending together, but you can see an invasion has started, and what should be a locale we get lost in the beauty of has been tarnished by Andros' forces, and this makes it more personal. Well, maybe not as important as the fact that the new story here basically implies that Andros killed Fox's father, but this is still a very good introduction to set the stakes. This will also be the most developed locale we see in the whole game, and it looking just like Earth does bring obvious parallels. We also come to terms with most of the gameplay here, just ignoring that tutorial. Our lasers shoot, and they can be upgraded a couple of times by flying through these laser upgrade items. We can also do a charge shot that locks onto enemies, and it will even boost our score if used correctly. We have limited bombs that are also replenished by flying through the items, and they are great for large crowds. We can just press the button and be done with it, or if you want to time it optimally, press it a second time to get that perfect detonation done. Our health is replenished by flying through silver rings, and gold rings also heal it a little, though collecting 3 of those will extend your health bar for the rest of that level. Basically, there are goodies all over the place that you want to prioritize. There are even some 1-ups, which were a godsend when I first played this game. Each regular level also has a checkpoint, which does exactly what you expect it to. And whenever we crash out and have to restart, we're back to our basic laser and 3 bombs like whenever you first started the game. Our laser upgrades also disappear if we lose our wings, which as I said earlier is much easier to do on the expert difficulty. But after flying through almost everything the stage has to offer, it's onto the boss, and the one most first time players will experience is our introduction to all range mode, and this boss is a fantastic opportunity to practice on. He has so many weak spots and different strategies for how you can kill him, even though it is easier just to shoot his weak spot and not prioritize everything else. That said, it's almost deceptive. This gives the impression that the bosses will have more strategies than just shoot the weak spot, which doesn't often come up in this game. But earlier in the level, unless you knew what you were doing, like you had hindsight from multiple playthroughs, your squad mate Falco will lose all his health and flee the level for repairs. And even if you save him, there is another prerequisite that you have to do, but if you manage to do both of those, then you don't even see this first all-range mode boss fight. You're onto a whole different boss fight behind a waterfall, and on 3DS, it's clear right behind that waterfall, whereas on the N64 they had this annoying chunk of raised ground, just to punish players I suppose. But yeah, this whole other optional boss we could have done instead continues to be on rails, and this time it's a remake of the first game's first boss. That's a really cute reference, one of the many in this game. What level 2 you get. It's no longer a choice made at the very beginning, it's all based on your level mastery and whatever choices you make in the stage. Almost every level going forward has some sort of system like this, and frankly the few that don't feel like missed opportunities. Though for other levels it's not really a choice between 2 bosses, but it will be some kind of level mastery. And in one of the best decisions the game could make, if you get what the game considers the harder level to reach, you can still just choose to play the easier level. So if you do that all-range boss on Corneria, you're forced onto Meteor, the blue pathway. But if you took out the secret boss behind the waterfall, you go to Sector Y on the red pathway, but you can still choose to go to Meteor. For players that want a high score in this high score based game, this is fantastic. It means you can choose to go to Meteor without deliberately limiting your score on Corneria. Players who want to visit the blue route levels would basically have to sabotage themselves, and that's not fun. But yeah, the levels are still in 3 routes sorta. There's the blue route, which is meant to represent easy, yellow, which is meant to represent normal, and red, which is meant to represent hard. But don't take the difficulty ratings too seriously because they don't actually represent the game's difficulty. Titania is one of the hardest levels in the game, despite it being supposedly easy, and Sector Z is incredibly easy despite it being in the hard lane. It's more that you get knocked down a lane whenever you mess up, and you get the option to go up if you do the harder optional objective. Anyway, these 2 level 2s are great, both for hallways in space between planets, and they make me both realize the different atmosphere of this remake. The original presented all space levels as well black with stars, what you'd probably expect space to be. The only shakeups would be if you can see a planet in the background, or whatever sector you're on, which are these beautiful gas clouds in space that kind of represent an English letter. Here, each space level has a wider variety of colours, but it never feels out of place. It's just that it's no longer just black. There's some blues in there too, for example, and it's really pretty. Though it does in some ways lose the tense atmosphere of before. Whenever I played this remake, I used to always complain about the way space looked, but I've really come around to it, and I really appreciate the extra variety of aesthetics here. I feel similarly with the new redesigns of the sectors, though I blame this largely on nostalgia. But the original 3 sectors popped, and they've been lodged in my brain forever. But here on 3DS, well, they're okay. I accept them. They're completely solid, but you know, I'm not really sold on them either. By no means do I find them unpleasant. It's kind of a 2 cake situation, even if I prefer the first cake I had. The 3DS here is pretty guilty of asteroids just popping in. Pop-in is a noticeable thing across the entire game, and really it's across both releases. It's just that it seems worse here on 3DS, with these giant rocks just appearing against this bright, vibrant space behind it, with a screen you'll have relatively close to your eyes, and you're not playing this on any kind of CRT or anything. Though the game does kind of trick you into focusing your eyes just on where the R-wing is, and everything else is kind of periphery, so you won't notice it too much unless you're looking out for it. One thing Meteor doesn't falter with here is showing level 3 Fortuna behind it as you get closer to it. The space levels tend to show the next level in the background, just to highlight the impending threat ahead. Also because, you know, space is kind of like that in real life. We see similar things with stages like Sector Y, as we get closer to the eponymous cloud. Meteor will also be most players' first introduction to the concept of your teammates just skipping out on a level. If one had to leave earlier due to their health running out, they don't just skip the end of that level, but the entire following stage they have to sit out for repairs. For new players, this is a nice punishment for failing to keep characters alive. Things get a little harder, and for experienced players, it's got an extra layer of punishment because this game has medals you want to unlock, and those are only for players that do exceptionally well and get a certain score on the level, and keep every teammate alive for that level. Losing even a single guy puts you out of the running for 2 stages in a row. I love how this game ratchets up so much for experienced players without changing anything for the newly introduced players. And like I said, there's an expert mode which most players never touch because of its annoyances. But look, Fox? He cosplays Bachelor Bear and puts on some cool ass shades. This is why I need to play it exclusively, look at him. Though that does hide Fox's eyeliner, which he seems to wear now on the 3DS. I'll shut up about Meteor in a second, but it also has a warp that basically breaks this universe for a minute. And this is a really nice callback to the first Star Fox game, which featured a couple of these. And thankfully this won't cause the game to be unbeatable. These warps will just send you to a higher route. It's like saving Falco and doing some pretty smooth flying, but trippier. The way to access this warp in Meteor is to fly through these little rings that speed you up every time. It's harder to do than it initially looks, but once you're used to it, this is pretty easy to get. Once again, this is something most first-time players will struggle with, and that's why replaying this game is so important. Let alone the fact that first-time players would have missed out on Sector Y as well. But onto the boss of Meteor, and this one is similar to Corneria's alternate one. We don't do all-range mode, we're just flying through space like we normally do. But this level does have a nice feature where it will punish the player if they don't shoot accurately enough. An important lesson, so it's good to drill it into the player here. The weak spot is much smaller and has a shield covering a lot of it. If you hit the shield too many times, a projectile will be shot back at you. But really, it's a no-nonsense boss fight. It's pretty fun, I suppose. And you don't do this boss fight at all if you do that warp I mentioned earlier. And because that warp gives you a significantly higher score, this is one of those bosses I don't see too often. But like I said, this isn't the only level too, because Sector Y exists. It's another space level, though instead of fighting rocks and basic enemies, you get guys with shields and Andros' military fleets. It's a really fun time, and I generally prefer it to Meteor, but there's a lot less to say about it. I love the amount of ape faces we see all over the enemy ships here. And the level will also end with an all-range boss fight against a guy that calls us cocky little freaks. And on that note, I adore how the 3DS version tells us the name of every single boss in the game. This was sorely missing from the original, though this is the first level where we don't get any kind of alternate ending to it, unfortunately. No matter what you do, you're always fighting this boss or Sector Y. Though we did get some brief segments earlier where we got to choose which path we went down, and it gave us some different obstacles. That's fun. But yeah, this is largely how the game will go. You don't get too many shakeups that completely change the end of a level, unfortunately. So if you play this level for the first time, you'll almost certainly go onto the yellow path for the first time. This is meant to be the in-between, and it just represents a few levels in the kind of center of everything. If you want to continue on the red route, you need to get a certain score to qualify for the stage Aquas. And it's a strange choice in universe, but it's probably the most rewarding way to get this from a player point of view. This requires a sense of mastery of the level, and it's propped up with either Peppy sharing how proud of you he is, or Falco clowning on you for how much you suck. But before I go any further, I need to talk about the voice lines. Star Fox 64 was famous back in the day for having so many voice lines on this console. It felt cinematic, or so I'm told. These voices were all iconic and drilled their way into everyone's brains, and unfortunately some became memes. But it's a testament to how perfectly delivered each line was, and how the game's lines were just that well written. Well, by the standards of cheesy 90s games, I mean. And even with the cheese dripping all over these voice lines, I still think these lines hold up well today. It was never bad voice acting, it was just earnest but silly voice acting. I bring this up because the 3DS version had to recreate all this with very few of the original actors reprising their roles. And the returning actors who are here, they do a great job recreating their 15-year-old deliveries, albeit a person familiar with both games can tell these apart.
Check your G-diffuser system.
Check your G-diffuser system.
Keep shooting! We've got lots of torpedoes!
Keep shooting! We've got lots of torpedoes!
Annoying bird, I am the Great Leon!
Annoying bird, I am the Great Leon!
My beautiful reward!
My beautiful reward!
But the rest of the voices, the vast majority of these, they had big shoes to fill. And it's easy for a casual fan to notice that these lines don't sound exactly the same, let alone some actually having been slightly rewritten, like it no longer says Einstein anymore. But these actors did a fantastic job, and it's so impressive how close they were able to get to the original, even with different people.
Time to show the monkeys who's boss!
Time to show the monkeys who's boss!
Take care of the guy behind me, Fox!
Take care of the guy behind me, Fox!
You'll be seeing your dad soon, Fox.
You'll be seeing your dad soon, Fox.
Stick to the pond, Froggy.
Stick to the pond, Froggy.
I don't have anything bad to say on the vocal front of this entire game, well except for one small nitpick I'll get to much later. The music was redone as well, and across the board I prefer the Nintendo 64 music. I wish we had a toggle for it. But these are still great renditions, because these are based on the legendary soundtrack of the original. And you know what? Even the sound design of the game, the basic blowing shit up and crashing your vehicle, it just sounds so natural, it sounds perfect. I've never even stopped to think about it before, but these are amazing sound effects. Everything about this game, on an audio level, is perfect, with that one small exception I haven't even told you about. But still, this game manages to be that perfect you don't stop and think about it. But onto the levels again. The first 3 levels total, that mind you can't play all at the same time because Meteor and Sector Y cancel each other out. They're all the same format of stage, going straight down a hallway in your R-Wing, maybe you have an all-range mode boss fight. They're what the game is perhaps best at and most famous for, but the 3 level 3s here take you out of your comfort zone, and I love just how well orchestrated this is. We get different types of levels at these different intervals that help liven things up and prevent things from getting too samey. Like, I love Star Fox 1 and 2, But we don't get these little breathers that change up the pace enough in those games. You're doing the same thing from beginning to end for the most part, more so with Star Fox 1. Now Fortuna here is the Blue Routes level 3, and it's this frozen world of the Lylat system, which makes sense given that it's closer to the sun than Corneria, but you know, wait, I'm not gonna think about that. This level on 3DS is beautiful. It's a snowing wonderland now. And it's been properly named in all regions, because it used to be accidentally localized as Fortuna on N64, which is a different planet in the Lylat system, not actually in this game, strangely enough. This entire stage is likely the first time a new player will get a stage that is all range mode. Previously, like I said, it was limited to bosses at the end of regular stages, but here we have to see how Nintendo designs an entire stage with this concept. We're given a central focal point, and all these stages will have one to help orient the players, because everything else is basically featureless, mostly flat ground, maybe with a nondescript hill or something, maybe a pole to liven things up. That's when it's not just all space. Look, I love the addition of all range mode, but unfortunately it does come with some boring level design in this game. Later Star Fox games would add more to the level design of all range mode. We also run into the issue of the gameplay here being a bit more monotonous, because it is more random. It's not this pre-calculated rollercoaster of thrills the main levels are, you're just in a map and shooting things. Not to mention that it usually just comes down to shoot the target, overshoot it, do a U-turn back, and then shoot it on the way back. You know, it's a bit tiresome. And since we can't aim independently of our movements, dogfights suffer the most here. If only we had some kind of gyro-controlled gamepad with its own screen, that would save the series for sure, everyone would love that. So yeah, these pure or range mode levels tend to be some of my least favourites, but I love them nonetheless. They're the spice that livens up this game, and each one has a unique feeling which is impressive considering how on the surface similar they actually are. Things start off pretty normally here. They almost all have the same opening moment, where you just shoot some weak enemies all over the screen, and protect your teammates who are really useless in these stages especially. You get giant arrows on the screen telling you to go help them, and they'll complain if you don't help them quickly enough. Or in Falco's case, he'll do that, but then complain that you helped him too. So yeah, it's easy to see why some people hate these squad mates, but I still love them. Anyway, shoot the enemies. It's a mindless start, but then our friend Rob will let us know that a bomb is going to go off soon. This is a surprise to the Star Fox team, so they have to go disarm it, but before they can, they're interrupted with the beautiful debut of Team Starwolf. This is a team dogfight where we have to take out all 4 members of that team, who are basically Dark Mirror versions of our team. Wolf O'Donnell is like Fox McCloud, because their last names are Irish and Scottish respectively, and they're basically the same country if you ask an American. Pigma Demgard is Peppy Hair's rival because they had the shared backstory of Pigma's role in the original Team Star Fox. Leon Pulaski is like Falco Lombardi because they're both arrogant and think they're hot shit but they aren't. And then Andrew Oikoni is the other one, and you know, he's like Slippy, you know. I don't know, just throw him in there. You think he'd be like Fox because he's the Starwolf Nepo baby because he's Andros' nephew, but nah, he and Slippy, they're the other ones. These battles are a big upgrade over the Star Fox 2 versions, which were just one-on-one fights. Here it's much more of a spectacle, and you need to do all the work and shoot down all 4 members of yourself, while your teammates basically just kite the enemies and ask you for help. These are the highlights of all range mode for me, and this formula will repeat itself on occasion. You really do feel like a dog fighting fox fighting a wolf, and it's made even better here on 3DS with a simple addition. All of Team Starwolf have visible health bars over their ships now, which helps you prioritize which ones to shoot, because they all do look identical. Previously on the Nintendo 64, it would only display their health when they did their banter, which was entirely random, outside of forcing lines like
What the heck?
whenever you did a somersault. I also tested this with and without the wingman Slippy, and their health displayed regardless, which is a nice feature. And that's because in regular missions, each of these 3 teammates have extra functions. with Slippy's being the most valuable in my opinion. Peppy gives you tutorial fodder like when and how to do a break, or a boost, or a barrel roll. Haha, that's the funniest thing ever. This makes them feel worthless in a game with a lengthy forced tutorial before you start the game, and as you replay the game over and over, you never need these hints. Oh yeah, and because of the way dialogue is shifted to the bottom screen, now when Peppy gives his little tutorials, they're highlighted on the main screen for a few seconds, which is a nice little pop-up that doesn't really interfere with anything, and it makes it easier for new players to learn how to do these. Falco is there to get you onto the harder routes. He explicitly did this in Corneria as you can't get to Sector Y without him, but the other times he'll help provide assistance in things like shooting required targets that Fox can solo. Both of those are pretty okay additions, but Slippy is always appreciated because he shows the boss's health, which is nice even if it's never needed. You can get a nice feel for boss's health when you replay this game a billion times, but a visual readout is a cool bonus. And this means that if any of these characters aren't with you on the stage, you won't get these bonuses. Back to Fortuna, because the Star Wolf ships aren't proper bosses, Slippy's role isn't as important here. So here, if you don't have a teammate, it just means more enemies will shoot at you, which isn't ideal. This gets exponentially harder the fewer allies you have, as basically they are all targeting you. So yeah, for the all range mode levels, the helpful things your allies do is just protect you a little bit, at the expense of your own health. If you take too long to defeat the enemy team here, a timer will appear, and if that reaches 0, you essentially fail the mission. But it's not a failure state, it just means that you completed the level, but you're forced to continue on the blue path because, a bomb went off. Previous levels didn't really do this. Here you get a special sad completion music that is actually titled Mission Failed, which means the music is actually meaner here because the mission still says it's completed even if you do fail it. This song is a melancholic version of the regular completion music. It's a nice little thing that I don't get to hear enough. But this is a teaching moment to show even the newest, least skilled players how they can improve on replays without anything as cryptic as flying through arches or going through these weird speed boost things. With enough practice, Star Wolf will be defeated long before the bomb timer even becomes an issue. And that's so rewarding to get to that point. That's what this game is about. Similarly, on the middle path, the first of the middle path, we have Katina. And this stage is, well, it's kind of Fortuna again. It's another all-range level on a barren stage that the Nintendo 64 originally gave us, but here on 3DS it looks beautiful. And I have to bring it up really with Katina here, because this might be the most important one. This was a disgusting muddy wasteland before. It looked like something you'd see in a 2000 shooter. But here it's, well, I don't know if I call it pretty, but it's a pretty important upgrade. It still has the same color palette, it's unmistakably Katina, but well, it doesn't look like shit anymore. Now here, we just shoot mindless enemies, but before we even get to that, Fox's class traitor friend Bill, who joined the Cornerian military, is here, and he'll be our ally for the level.
Hang on, guys! Help is on the way!
This mission basically takes place on a military base of Cornerias, which is now being invaded by lots of mindless enemies. It's also occupied by mindless Cornerian soldiers who are easy to mistake for the enemies, but unfortunately they don't get your score counter higher. So ideally you should be careful and just shoot the real enemies and don't shoot your allies, but now you don't really need to. There's no punishment for killing what the game considers good guys, beyond Bill criticizing you a little, so it's in your best interest to shoot everything that moves. In fact, if you want the high score for this medal, which is actually deceptively hard to get, you should be selfish, because all these allies will kill Steel. Kill everyone in the military in this game. The mission will spice things up shortly, because an alien mothership will appear, and this is basically our objective of the level. And this is threefold in what it brings to the table. First and foremost, it opens the hatches to release many more enemies at set intervals. Secondly, the hatches are the weak spot that you need to shoot, but they're only occasionally available. And once you take out all 4 hatches, or if you fail to do that quickly enough and enough time passes, the third thing will come up. It's a core that appears alongside a timer for how much longer you have left to defeat it. Much like the Fortuna bomb, if you fail this, you still move on, but with lots of destruction and a demotion to the blue path again. Also, this will recreate a popular movie scene which becomes less universally known as a reference with each passing year. In a touch I love, there are 2 levels you can go to from Katina, and regardless of which one you do, Bill will show up for a moment to help, though it's more appreciated on Sector X than it is Solar. Both these levels will be Bill-less if you reach them from Fortuna instead, and this helps add a sense of cohesion to your run that can be missed since these levels are basically isolated chunks that don't impact each other much. But hey, if you did well on Sector Y, you don't have to worry about any of that, because Aquas is awaiting you. Oh yeah, thanks Rob, I'll keep that in mind. Anyway, Aquas may be the most unique feeling level in the whole game, and for that reason I often see it as one of the least popular levels for players. But for me personally, I've always enjoyed it, and it wouldn't crack my list of favourites, but I appreciate everything unique it does. Even the music is this out of place, hauntingly beautiful track in a game that is mostly these bombastic action tunes. But yeah, what exactly is Aquas? This is our water planet, with the remains of what appears to be an ancient civilization. Think Atlantis, but as a whole planet. But this whole mission being underwater changes a lot of the core experience for the first time, as we're no longer using our trusty Artwing. Instead, we have to pilot the Blue Marine, a submersible craft that only one teammate can be in, and it's the only one we have. So for this entire mission, your buddies are just chilling out in the Great Fogs, watching you. They're never in danger, but they have a lot of running commentary. I kind of adore the way this game does it. This simultaneously grounds you and keeps you from feeling alone. But also, you are still completely alone in this underwater unusual habitat. There's this conflicted feeling of isolation. You're being watched over by allies, but you're still physically alone. And this worked really well on Nintendo 64, as Aquas was this incredibly dark and foreboding threat. The mission was even titled Terror of the Deep. That's how well it fits. This was much more tense than any other level, and you had to use your weapon to help aid visibility. Unfortunately on 3DS, well, Aquas to me is personally the largest downgrade visually, and that's not to say it's not beautiful, this really is, but I'd trade it all away for a little more darkness. Though that isn't to say the 3DS version doesn't have darkness at all. It does, and it actually does this unique thing where you get gradually more darkness as you make your way deeper into this ocean planet. In some ways, I prefer this approach with an escalating threat, but the problem is, even at its darkest, it doesn't ever reach the original. And while I'm being negative towards the stage I really like, trust me, I love this stage, the 3DS version adds one more feature here that, while a nitpick, is by far my least favourite addition to this entire remake. When starting in any of the stages where we don't use the R-Wing, that being the 2 Landmaster stages and this, it now gives us a pop-up explaining the controls and how it differs from normal. In theory, it's a great pop-up for first-time players. It would make things less jarring, and I have no problem with it existing in some format. The problem is, it now pops up every time you do these levels, no matter how familiar you are with it, no matter if you have all the medals, no matter if you're on expert mode, it will show up every single time. It went from a nice bonus to a nuisance that very quickly irritated me. And it's just something that you can mash through, but the problem is its placement. Instead of doing it before the level starts, it does it about a second into the level. I have decades of muscle memory where I'm already revving to go and I've already moved around and did some basic shots in that second. But no, I get interrupted with this little thing and it throws me off my game. Like the beginning of Macbeth with this cargo that I have to shoot immediately, it's tricky to do that with this interruption. This just interrupts the flow of a game which is all about the flow state of muscle memory and instinct. That's criminal. Like, it's ultimately not a big issue, most players don't care, but for the dedicated hardcore fans, this is just kind of an annoyance. I can think of lots of better ways to have implemented this, including an option to have it just not show up at all once you're already used to it. And you know what? This game has individual level score attack modes which means you can play just a single level over and over to refine your score, which is a huge bonus for this game, and is another reason that this is my preferred version. But here, the pop-up never appears. So the game is capable of giving you the original feel, it just chooses not to during the campaign for some reason. This won't impact things for most players, but for me it's really a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, for a game that I just want to replay over and over. One upside that this remake does add is now that it's portable though, you can save the game in the middle of a run and come back to it later. It's just a swell addition. So now, you don't need to play this game in one large chunk or even do multiple back-to-back chunks like me. You can just play a couple levels, take a break, come back to it later. Really, that's the kind of addition that a handheld version needed. It's a quality of life addition for people that don't have too much time to sink into a game like this. And if you are the kind of weird addict like me, it's now the kind of game you can play on your lunch break or commuting. But that's enough about the remake changes. What makes Aquas what it is, beyond being isolated from your crew? Well, for starters, this is the most alien planet we've been to thus far. It's not a military base, it's just an alien planet that's been corrupted by Venom's influence. It's now being polluted and the life forms are becoming these weird bioweapons. So instead of shooting enemy soldiers or mechs, you're shooting cute little alien animals just living their life. And this is also the only stage where we pilot the Blue Marine, Star Fox's fans' most hated vehicle until the Gyrowing was introduced. But I've never had a problem with it. It's basically just an R-wing that's a bit slower and it can't do somersaults. But it does have unlimited torpedoes that basically lock onto enemies. So yeah, the Blue Marine is still a blast to play. The only issue I have with it is it's a little bit less of a blast than the R-wing. So this feels like a downgrade that's not worth it to some. But the fact that this gives us an ocean to navigate that the R-wing wouldn't be able to handle normally, I'm really grateful for it. I'm a Blue Marine stan. You did good, Slippy. Though I do wonder if some fans' dislike of this comes down to the fact that Aquas as well, it's a pretty steep difficulty increase from what came before. The enemies are relentless here, especially those damn starfish. So even though you have infinite torpedoes, and that these are just regular silly little creatures, this level will want you dead. Thankfully you're not babysitting anyone else, so it does ease up there. Aquas on 3DS has this nice little enhancement here, where the button to fire torpedoes also launches lasers. So you can just spam one button since you're never not firing torpedoes. Though the old method of moving your finger a little bit is still here for purists. I'm one of those people that likes to move my finger a little bit because you get slightly more lasers if you do it that way. I wonder why my hand hurts now, even though I'm only 30. This trek through the stage gives us more dangerous enemies, falling rocks, whatever the hell these things are, and it's all hugely appreciated and it's a wonderful shake-up from Venom's forces. It even ends with this enemy bioweapon called Bakun, which I don't feel comfortable saying. Feels like a slur. But I still love what this guy is. He feels almost out of place for what Star Fox 64 is. In some ways it's kind of more like a Zelda boss fight. Unfortunately, after this great stage, Aquas is one of the few stages to commit the following sin. It only leads to a single level. There aren't 2 objectives here or anything to fail. Once you do Aquas, you're automatically locked into the next level regardless of how well you do. And that next level can only be reached by Aquas, meaning that these 2 stages are basically linked together. It's kind of unfortunate for a game when mixing routes is its forte. This was likely the result of development struggles. Leaks, data mining, and interviews over the years have shown us this game's scope was meant to be a lot bigger, and we were meant to have more stages as well as routes between them. But 3D game development was a struggle at the time, and the Nintendo 64 was known for dry spouts between releases, so I can see why they'd deliver the best game they could in a reasonable time frame, rather than tinker with it forever, especially since the previous game was cancelled and never saw a release at the time. So Aquas and 2 other levels in this game leave me feeling dry when it comes to routes. And for some reason, these 3 stages all feature a bioweapon as the boss. I'm sure it's a coincidence, this isn't a shame bosses because I love all 3, but for that, I will nickname these stages the Bioweapon 3. Just ignore that the Star Fox 64 player guide states that Macbeth is a bioweapon, it isn't. It doesn't even look like a cool alien guy. Plus it's called an experimental weapon here, so I win. Oh, and then again, Goras is, it's more like a prehistoric beast. Doesn't make much sense for it to be a true bioweapon. Okay, my cool classification's falling apart. There are 3 levels in this game that have a weird boss fight where it doesn't talk to you. And I can't think of a better name, so I'm going to call it the Bioweapon 3, even though it's technically incorrect. But onto a level that doesn't even know the meaning of the term restrictive path. It's Sector X. God, do I love this level. Unfortunately, this is the sector level with the gas cloud looking the closest to how it did on N64. Aw, thank you, you knew I'd care. Now, I don't want to say the stage is perfect, but I think this is perfect in terms of what the developers were going for. This is the ideal. What this level achieves is what I wish every level in this game could reach. This is the goal, and when we eventually get another Star Fox game, which won't happen, for a long time at least, I want them all to learn from Sector X. For starters, this is kind of like Sector Y, at least that's the closest level in mind, and not just because they're sectors, but because this is another corridor level through space, and instead of the asteroid field, this is through one of Andross's many bases. This was originally a military research station where Andross was developing some kind of secret weapon. Yet it doesn't look like that, because debris is everywhere. It's clear that something destroyed this location. Where other than some tight squeezes, it doesn't feel any different from a gameplay point of view. It's more of the same, and that's what I love. There's lots of enemies. In fact, this is probably the easiest level in the game to get the medal requirement for in terms of the score. It isn't the easiest one overall, because Pepe loves to get himself killed here, and that does negate the medal. And he's not the only one with a death wish, but more on that in a second. This level comes to an end with an unveiling of the secret weapon. A giant robot, which was for some reason given what looks like 90s polygon breasts. It seems to be malfunctioning, and it's implied it destroyed the entire base. It just keeps asking for its creator, and it's almost pitiful.
Where is the creator?
It obviously doesn't know what's going on, but it perceives dangers and is dealing with them. And this includes you, obviously. On the surface, this is a very standard fight. Shoot the eyes, avoid the hands, the Nintendo staple. But once we complete the first phase of it, which, by the way, it would seemingly be defeated, but we have a health bar right here and it went from half to 0, so we know this isn't actually the end of it. Regardless, Slippy, beloved wingmate, and yes I love him, he goes in to help us, which is a nice thought considering none of the other Star Fox members ever do anything helpful. Unfortunately, this blows up in his face as you would expect. The giant robot will just knock Slippy off course into a whole other planet. This adds some serious stakes that I'll get to when I cover that planet, Titania. But for now, this is the most serious thing Andross's forces have done to us directly thus far across any of the timelines. If you ignore Fox's dad, of course. So take out this boss, Slippyless, and if this is how things wound up for you, the rest of the game is unfortunately set in stone. You'll have no more routes left to choose, you're basically set. Otherwise, we could have defeated the threat before Slippy butted in, and that's how we move up to the yellow path. These next 2 stages are some of my favourites across the entire game, and they have shared elements. But Sector X does something unprecedented. Until now, every stage has either had 1 or 2 exits, but somehow we get 3 of them. And yes, that means we can somehow go all the way from Sector X here on the blue path, all the way to the red path on the other end of a Lylat system. It's a giant leap that skips even the middle. Earlier in the stage, before the boss came up, we had to choose if we want to go down a left or right path. And everything I said is assuming you went down the right, or you did the left but didn't successfully do the little extra task the game presents. The left is a much more volatile path, it has bombs everywhere, and it feels like a location you don't belong. It wants you dead. But there are these closed little gates that open up if you repeatedly shoot at them, and then fly on through them. This is easier said than done, especially if you're at a single laser at this point. Though you can get some outside assistance from Bill if you went to Gatina earlier, he'll join you in shooting these gates. Now if you go through all of them successfully, you get another warp, just like you did in Meteor. But this one is much tougher, and it will fuck up your wings. Thanks to whatever these warps are, you go straight from Sector X to Sector Z. This is perfect in terms of what I want for level cohesion and amount of routes. If we scoot over to the next path, we're right in the middle of the Lylat system. In the center of the orbit of everything, we have the brightest and hottest location thus far, and it's simply named Solar. Contrary to what you're thinking, it's not a star. It's actually just a lava planet called Solar in the middle of the system, and there is no star present in the Lylat system that we see in this game. It's just off-screen somewhere. Don't ask me, I don't get it either, but for all intents and purposes, this appears to be a star. It technically isn't. Anyway, this level is basically what would happen if you flew your entire crew through the sun. The official reason you go there is because Andros is maybe doing experiments, but no, there is no real reason to go here, but it's a game, so we go there. Solar is an interesting location. As you'd expect, it's way too hot, so your health is always plummeting, and it gets worse the lower you fly. Though it won't ever kill you, it just brings your health all the way down to a single hit point. For us, the player, it's not a big deal because there's molten rocks everywhere, and they explode into silver rings which will heal the R-Wing. But for your teammates, they are at their most insufferable here. They love to fly low, have their health basically hit nil, and then they attract enemies, and it's all on them, but you're babysitting them and there's no way you can wrangle them away from the surface of the not quite sun, but basically a sun. If you went to Katina here, Bill will show up. He doesn't really contribute anything, but hey, he shows up. While it doesn't look like it at all, so far this stage is probably the closest to Aquas. We're killing the local fauna, there's no enemy in sight to taunt us on the comms, and the enemy is a bioweapon. And in its defense, this guy looks cool as hell, and as a kid he was my favorite boss. On the 3DS, he bleeds lava now, whereas before he used to bleed giant meatballs, and that's a nice fix, it makes more sense. But overall, this is the same boss fight. It feels almost out of place, but I still love shooting his limbs and then shooting his face. Even though the boss itself is spectacular, this is one of the bioweapon 3 I mentioned earlier. No matter what you do on Solar, you have one exit. And it's a shame a level as unique as this, which had such a fun final encounter, had to devolve into this. And because you'll likely leave Solar with your teammates either dead or near dead, there's nothing really gained from coming here. Not even the music here can save it, because it's just reusing Sector Y's track. This is unfortunately a level I often avoid, even though in the moment I love it. It's just a liability, unfortunately. Because you see, this level 4 will just take you to level 5 Macbeth. But the other level 4s, being Sector X and Zonus, they both can also take you to level 5 Macbeth. So there's no real benefit to coming here, unless you really want to experience the level, and unfortunately, I think Zonus and Sector X are some of the best levels in the game. Wouldn't go that high for Solar. This is just some kind of middle child in the middle of the system, and I don't care about it. But hey, it's not bad. And thanks to the score attack mode, maybe I'll play this level more often. It won't ruin my run to come here, so I get to experience it just on its own. Anyway, it's on to the last level 4, that's a weird thing to say. Zonus. My god. This is one of my favourite levels, and I kind of realised, I'm calling everything one of my favourites, and I'm sorry, I just love this game. While I don't really have a definitive ranking of levels, and I can't do one without changing my mind the next day, this would almost certainly be up there. It's definitely top 5, maybe even top 3. I'm just rambling. Can you tell I made this video just for myself? This stage, unfortunately, you can only get to from Aquas, which means that to get to Zonus, you have to first do Corneria, Sector Y, Aquas, then Zonus. There's no other way to get here, no other branching pathways. This is the biggest blight against the level, unfortunately. In a game all about mixing and matching paths, Zonus is incredibly railroaded, and by the time you get here, you're over halfway through the game. You've had no freedom. This is my biggest grievance with Star Fox 64 as a base game. You basically just need more routes, that's it. Let's not focus on the incredibly restrictive way to get here, and let's focus on Zonus itself. This level's design, the timing of enemies and challenges, everything it presents is just phenomenal. And to be shallow, this is one of the biggest glow-ups on the 3DS. I was blown away when I saw this. The original version, it looks alright, but here, it's stunning. This is another water planet, so it might seem weird that we did this just after Aquas, but instead of being under the surface, we're flying on top of it. And the pollution here is much more apparent as the water is a sickly green. Andros has turned this into one of his military bases just to experiment on creatures, and it's disgusting. Your teammates will talk of this toxic planet disparagingly, and allude to how beautiful it used to be, and it's something we never get to see personally, we just have to take their word for it. But it's not hard to imagine a prettier version of Zonus. Though part of it is helped by the fact that we have a storm, which is a wonderful change of pace that makes this watery planet feel nothing like even Corneria, which had water before. The surface of the water is unpredictable, as it bops up and down. It feels like this volatile planet is doing its best to throw off its invaders, but nothing is working. This trip is more than just a trip down a corridor. Kinda. Not really. But it's meant to be a stealth mission. So do all your normal shooting of enemies, and the mutated fauna and everything, but there are also these searchlights we have to look out for, so shoot them all so we're not detected. In theory, this just means we have more enemies to shoot, enemies that won't hurt you, but still. But what this really is a linear level incorporating the kinds of failure mechanics we saw in stages like Katina or Ficina. Your mission is to sneak in undetected, and if you mess that up, these searchlights will go red and you'll bump down to the yellow pathway. And not only does that limit your routes, each of these searchlights are worth points when you shoot them, but the moment you're detected, they're no longer worth anything. So it really is in your best interest to go for everything and remain undetected. You get help taking out these searchlights thanks to Cat. She's a pink girl whose entire personality is being a girl.
Is that any way to greet a girl?
I do enjoy her, but it does kind of sting to have her be the only female rapper in the game, especially after what Star Fox 2 offered. It's a crime that game didn't come out back then. But anyway, Cat is Falco's friend? I don't know. They used to work together, they have some kind of history, some of which is canon, and a lot of it's created by furry porn artists. But basically, she is Bill but tinted pink, and she has a really catchy theme song whenever she shows up. But the stage was already amazing, it was already near the top. But once you get to the end of it, it has one of my favorite bosses in the entire game. And not just that, it has my favorite boss name, the Saru Marine. I'll trust till you get the name, and I won't explain it. But this boss shows some of the most creativity and logic thus far, instead of just shooting the glowing spots or delimbing a giant lava monster. Here it's a multifaceted attack where we need to shoot the snorkel so it can't repair itself underwater, which it will try to do if you destroy the submarine out of water. Then you need to shoot down its cannons, which it will try to grab again thanks to this crane on its back, which will reach underwater and grab it if its snorkels are down. So then you have to shoot the crane. Now that it has no snorkel or no crane, there's no way it can repair itself. Now that it's near defenseless, take out its last defense, and it's a sitting duck. A sitting duck firing lasers at you, but still. You just have to systematically tear this thing apart, because it is really resilient with multiple fail-safes if you don't do the exact order that the game wants. And I love it, there's a logic behind it. Andros didn't just make a thing with glowing weak spots for once. Oh, and the American Star Fox 64 website back in the day, it said this level had a bioweapon. It's probably alluding to this vehicle that we just destroyed. No. I'm pretending this doesn't exist because it messes with my already faulty name. The American 90s sources can't be trusted anyway. For some reason the player's guide thought Solar was a star and not just a lava planet somehow in the middle of the system. You can't trust 90s American sources. From here on out, it's on to pastures that are, well, less green than Zonus, and I mean that aesthetically. As mentioned earlier, we get two paths here. One red, one yellow. The red is your reward for a successful stealth mission, and yellow is for when your cover is blown. Now, finally, you're not locked to a specific path anymore after Zonus. The game might be winding up, but you get to make a choice for once if you were on this route. But let's ignore that and go back to the blue path, because Titania it is, a level that I will boast about for a while, but it is the final of what I call the Bioweapon 3, even though it's not a bioweapon, I don't care, I'm still calling it that as a catchier name than non-verbal enemy boss of a corridor level 3. Now Titania is two things. One, it's our introduction to the Landmaster, more on that in a second, but it's also the reason the blue yellow, and red paths can't mean difficulty, because Titania being on the blue path is a cruel joke. This is a huge difficulty spike from anything we've seen in the game on the blue path or the yellow path. Honestly, even including this on the yellow path would almost feel cruel, but here it is. We even have another Landmaster level on the yellow path, and that is a cakewalk in comparison to this. So the routings make no sense. Now anyway, Titania is a stage that hates you, and it makes sense because you weren't meant to go here. General Pepper of the Cornerian army told you not to go. It's a restricted planet, no one is allowed here. But Fox needs to go because he won't leave his pal Slippy hanging.
What are you doing? It's too dangerous there.
I can't leave Slippy hanging.
So this will be a stage in search of Slippy, and thankfully he's in a straight line of where you started off, just after an appropriate amount of enemies and obstacles. But yes, to get to the Landmaster, it pops up the tutorial. I won't complain about it again, I still hate it. But this is the clear fan favourite of the two alternate vehicles, and I can see why. In some ways the Blue Marine was a stripped down Artwing, but here it feels substantially different. It's, well, a Master of Land. It can't fly, because that would be silly and that would defeat the entire point, right Star Fox Zero? Here, instead of doing sharper turns with the L or R buttons, those buttons will turn the thrusters on to propel us in either direction. Hold them down together for a really nice hover, which is amazing to learn how to use perfectly. Other than that, you're basically at the mercy of gravity. Other than that, this is basically an Artwing. Like, sure, the lasers are different, but it's still the same basic controls and you still have bombs that are limited. But just limiting of your movement makes such a big difference here. This feels nothing like the Artwing, even if it is mechanically very similar. At ground, the enemies are ruthless, and your movement options are very limited, so it's a very tough time here. So Titania being some people's introduction to the Landmaster feels very cruel. But nonetheless, this is one of my favourite stages in the game. There's so much to love here. This planet has an untold lore that you get glimpses of. It feels instantly more interesting to traverse than any of the other planets thus far, and I'm also a sucker for barren desert aesthetics. But it helps that this level has an uneven terrain. You can never predict what's going to be next. Especially in a sea of stages that either have flat ground or just open space. Titania feels alive in a way nothing else does. Enemies here look nothing like anything else we've seen in the game. We've got these four-legged giant mech things, these giant laser turrets, or these leaping bombs, or enemies that throw boulders at you. The stage is just so unique. What's not to love? And the fact that you came here because of story reasons is also another reason that I love being here. A lot of the other pathways are just because it's a video game. You go to Aquas if you score a certain number of points on Sector Y, and if you don't, you go to Katina. Why? That doesn't matter. But here we have a solid reason. It's built in universe, and the few stages that do that really work their way into my heart. It also really deepens the bond. Fox and Slippy are meant to be good friends, and this shows it. After enough torment on this planet, we'll eventually find Slippy, and he's in the clutches of some weird alien thing that isn't a bioweapon but still. And this is one of my favourite boss fights. Look at him. We have to attack his heart, we have to hover over his tail, it's a great time. But the biggest problem with Titania is we can only get here from Sector X, and after this we can only go to Bolse. This is just the Zonus situation again. The game really needed more routes. I keep saying that, but it keeps being true. Why did they have to make a game where two of my favourite levels basically dictate half the route for you, and you also can't do both in the same run? It's just not fair. I don't know how they really could have done it, given just how close Titania is to Bolse and Venom. But you know, maybe they could have added a warp or something. It didn't stop Sector X. Just find a way for me to get onto that red path at the very end of this. On the opposite situation, welcome to Macbeth on the yellow path. This stage has two exits, one that will take us to Bolse, and the other will put us on the red path for the last time. This single stage will determine which ending you get, which meant you could have been flustering around on the blue path the entire time, but still get to Macbeth and work your way to the red path. Because of its importance, and more so, the fact that this level has the most possible ways to access it, 3 being Sector X, Solar, and Zonus, we have a stage that unfortunately I almost find played out. Macbeth is a stage that you will access across more routes than you can probably imagine. I wouldn't ever say I'm bored of this level. I'm not bored of any level, and if I was, I'd point to Corneria long before Macbeth. But Macbeth is almost a victim of the game's routing system. You'll come here a lot, no matter if you're in the red, yellow, or blue path beforehand. But you know what? That's fine, because I always love my time coming to Macbeth. This would also be on my short list of favourite levels. I need to stop saying that, but it's true, I love this game. Once again, it's top 5, but not top 3, like its precious sister Titania. This is once again a Landmaster stage. And as I alluded to, this is significantly easier than Titania. Enemies are more predictable, the ground is mostly flat, there are fewer enemies that want you dead, and most of your time here is just ganging up on a train driver who is even more railroaded than you are. Though that doesn't stop the triumphant and energetic music of Titania, which is reused here, from still feeling appropriate. Whether it's a rescue mission or looking at Choo Choo Train, this song is the perfect fit. That train driver is top notch, I love him. The entire stage he'll be taunting you.
What's wrong? Come a little closer. They're not taking me seriously.
He's an ever-present threat here, as the train is almost always by his side during this level, and you're just trying to catch up. The reason we're in a fierce battle with a train is because Macbeth is the industrial heart of the Lylat system, and is currently under control of Andros, as the train is delivering precious cargo that could change the tide of the battle. Also, this train engineer received one of the most important glow-ups in the remake. As a kid I didn't even know what he is, but look at him, it's very clear now. The stage itself received a nice facelift, but you know, it's nothing too impressive. That is until we get to this tunnel near the end of the stage. Everything gets dark, it just feels oppressive. Things light up with your energy blasts, and we get to see the steam emitting from the sides as obstacles come out to try to stop you. This is frankly beautiful, and we'll see lighting this great again later on Venom. This makes me wish we could have gotten an original game, or even just an extra bonus level or something. The artists of this game had a knack for making these tunnels look great, and I wish we could have seen more somehow. It's not a huge deal, though it is making me think back to the original Star Fox, which had Macbeth as a hollow planet where we actually played underground. I wish Star Fox 64 had something like that, but I'll settle for one of my favourite games ever that I consider near perfect, to not have every single idea I want in it. It's a hard life. As cool as an hollow planet is, we get a choo-choo train here, and we cannot undervalue that. And this choo-choo train is not surprisingly our final boss. Well, kinda. The conductor will unleash Macbeth, one of the most devastating bosses in the entire game, and probably the one that I struggle with the most. And that's cause, well, I'm out of practice for this. I'll explain why in a minute, but this is some stuff I need to praise. Unlike some of the other hallway bosses, where we're just repeatedly over water or on space, this has a finite amount of level to work with. They had to make all these obstacles and all these healing stations for this train track boss, and there's markers to show how long you've been fighting him for. But because this can't go on forever, once you get to a certain point, the boss will just do a one-hit kill on you. Which might sound unfair, but if you're playing this boss, you would have died by now, or you would have defeated it by now. It's basically a chore to get to this point. Even though this boss himself is pretty hard to defeat, there's quite a few attacks that he has. It's easier just not to do this boss, and it's more rewarding too somehow. Because, well, instead of fighting this super difficult boss that you only have a set amount of time to do, just shoot some stationary objects that are in the exact same location on every single playthrough. And doing this incredibly easy with hindsight task will make it so the boss diverts to a different track and crashes into the fuel depot, and it'll explode violently and award you many more points than this boss fight would have. Just don't fight this boss unless you really want to, because you're better off not doing it. Not only does it bump up your score and save you frustration, but that is how you get onto the red path for the final time. So yeah, doing this super challenging boss that you'll struggle with, that sends you to the little blue path that's meant to be easy. Once again, don't consider these to be actual difficulty qualifiers. Sometimes the game punishes you with harder stuff, and I don't know why. If you came here from Zonos, Kat will also help you shoot these incredibly easy to shoot things. Good for her. She gets to be included too. But her role is more noticeable on the other level Zonos can access. Sector Z. I'm sure no one in the comments will try to make fun of me for calling it that way, but thanks for boosting the algorithm. It's been a while, but here we are again, in a level that is just all range mode. Though unlike previous examples, This is all in space, and the challenge is unique and more time sensitive than anything we've come across yet. The Great Fox is just flying through Sector Z, this time not for any specific objective. This is flyover system. We're only here to get to Venom, and ideally we would not make any stops here. But this isn't an ideal situation. Andros' forces detect that we're here, and our stealth mission's at risk. So this empty area filled with nothing but debris and a sector in the background is now home to a bunch of enemies that are going to fly in and try to attack the Great Fox, and more importantly, they will be sending 6 missiles to the Great Fox to destroy it. Conveniently, it's in ascending order, so we get a nice difficulty curve. We start with 1 missile, and wave 2 is 2 missiles, and the final wave is 3. If he did all 6 at once we would be fucked, but Andros is being kind to us. So the 4 R-Wings are in theory here to shoot down all these missiles and protect the ship, though as you'd expect, your friends aren't really helping too much. They've got their own obstacles and they keep asking you to assist them. If you come here from Zonus, Kat will also help as well, and she's more useful than your friends because she won't ask for help every 2 seconds. These missiles are deceptively easy to destroy, to the point I found this to be one of the easiest levels in the game, and I do consider it the easiest on the red pathway. But after looking at what more people think of this and watching some friends play this game for the first time in a while,
Try being in my position.
Did I get it? No, you did not.
Nice doing that.
Fuck off! You got time, you got time. I super don't. Oh, yeah. Pew! It's okay, you can retry. Nice! Oh, fuck what? You. Are you kidding me? Damn. This is a bad level, actually. Please use it, but I know how to fucking turn. You can't...
No freezer.
Don't backseat. It will actually meet you.
Sector Z is punishing. It's just one of those levels that, like everything else, gets much easier if you repeatedly play this game obsessively.
Hey, that run went a lot easier.
Hell yeah. That was like flawless. He's got all the missiles yourself, too.
The issue is, these missiles are only available to shoot for a small amount of time, and it just takes a single one to hit your ship for the mission to fail. The map is also very guilty of considering you out of bounds, forcing you to do a U-turn back into the action, even when the missiles are off screen and you're just trying to get closer to them. Though I only noticed in my replays for this video that the 3DS version added a ring of space junk and asteroids all around the map so you have a reason to do a U-turn, whereas on N64, Fox just did it because he hated you, the player. But once you know the timing of everything, and where the game will let you shoot from, this stage does become a cakewalk. And I suppose, by the time I was skilled enough to get to Sector Z as a kid, I was skilled enough with this game to be able to handle it. Remember, it took me years to get to this stage as a kid, so I was pretty good by the time I was experiencing this even for the very first time. This stage is also home to a mechanic that I adore, even though it's largely pointless. You can fly into the Great Fox to get a health boost or restore your wing if you lose it, but this level doesn't have much downtime where you'll be able to use a feature like this, especially if you're trying to shoot the very few enemies the stage has to get the medal. But I love this attention to detail and I'm all here for it. This is the only stage with the Great Fox physically there, so I'm glad they thought of something to do with it. Now the pathways from this stage are dramatic, and yet this is my favourite in the game in terms of story. If you destroy the missiles, continue on to Area 6, the intended path you were trying to get to before this interruption. But if the missiles hit, a chunk of the Great Fox will be taken out and you're forced to go off course all the way to Bolts on the other side of the system. Most of the time, as I've alluded to, the reason you go to certain pathways makes no sense, with very few exceptions, and this is one of the few that really goes out to explain why you're doing it. I really wish the game had more things like this, even though they are really tough to ride around. One of my few issues with Sector Z is it's kind of unmemorable. It doesn't even get new music at all, it reuses Fortuna's soundtrack. Though I suppose you can think of this as the level Rob gets to shine the most.
Missile approaching. Distance 50.
But we don't have something like Bill chattering over us, or we don't get Star Wolf like we did in Fortuna, and there's no really talkative enemies. It is just Rob warning you about missiles that don't talk. And especially right after coming off Macbeth with the overly talkative train conductor who will never let you get a word to yourself, the stage really does feel kind of flat. I wouldn't consider this a bad stage, but it's just a bit more unmemorable. Even some of the other stages in the game, where you're not hearing an opponent talk back at you, are more well crafted because they're linear missions, like Aquas or Titania, which keep you enthralled for every second. Sector Z's kind of what would happen if Katina didn't have Bill or Fortuna didn't have Starwolf. It's just a level that I wish had more identity. But you know, it's still cool that it's appeared in Super Smash Bros. Once. You'll always have that, Sector Z. Thankfully, the rest of the game has more cool enemy banter. Well, sorta. And that sorta is Bolts, a stage that can be misread as the capital of Idaho. This is another all-range level, and it has two different variations, one of which is quite fun, and the other is, well, a little underwhelming. And it's all contingent on if you played Fortuna earlier in this run. Things start off with giant shields preventing all the enemies from being destroyed. And the only way around this is to take out the power of the force field, take out all the pillars around this circular level. And of course none of your teammates help, they just fly around to complain that you're not doing it quickly enough. Just gotta note that this stage looks so much more beautiful here on 3DS. And I know that's the case for basically everything, but on the N64, this level was just boring, it was just grey Katina. And on top of that, the lights kept flickering too much, and I knew some people that just struggled with this level because it was an eye strain. But here that's been toned down, and they've managed to make this satellite a much more pretty place. We can also see Venom here, which really highlights just how close we are to the big bad. Anyway, once you take out all the force fields, the enemies can be destroyed, and a giant pillar emerges from the center, which has glowing yellow spots to shoot. Shoot them all, or bomb them, which is significantly easier, and the level's done. Just be warned that the yellow dots will turn into lasers that shoot you once they're destroyed, so this can become chaotic at the end, especially if you're looking for that last damned one. But like I said, this is one variation of Bolts. If we did not do Fortuna earlier, then Star will show up after the force field's destroyed. This little addition does wonders to make this level feel much more impactful and less like a place filler. Every run of this game will have you fight Starwolf at least once, so this is the fail-safe in case you missed them earlier. But they are more or less the same as they were on Fortuna, since this is just a substitute for it. So you can continue to get Wolf to say what the heck every time you do a somersault. So they're not really improved in terms of difficulty here, even if Leon does want to torture you now. But after defeating them, it's on to Venom. And if not for the fact that there's a black screen saying what mission name and number it is, you could basically consider this as just one level, but it is technically two. That said, I'm still going to count it as just one continuous level. The Star Fox team enter Venom's atmosphere, and it's time for a direct assault. Venom's security isn't messing around. The Bolts route is usually considered the easier version of Venom by the community, and I'd kind of disagree for the most part. These forces are relentless. This is the kind of action climax you're waiting for. And on Expert mode, this is the hardest level in the game across all routes, because there are so many damned enemies, and you will lose your wing constantly. But even ignoring that, the layout here is a lot more complicated. It keeps splitting up into lots of different pathways that I still can't remember all of. Sometimes you'll be in a pathway with a friend, sometimes you're all alone, and all the time, something wants you dead. Be them enemies, the ground itself, or weird pillars flying right at you. Andros is doing everything he can to stop you. This is his final defense. Andros will even pop up in the communication systems just to taunt you.
Those tin cans are no match for me.
But after an arduous journey, it's on to the first boss of this stage. Yeah, and we get two of them here. Golmech. A golem mech of some sort. No idea who created it, but it's cool. And all it does is run away from us. Chase it down, and shoot every part of him until he is just an exposed robot with no protection, and then you're out of here. But if you spend like 5 minutes here and don't kill him, which you won't do unless you're trying to, then you'll fly straight into a brick wall. Somehow Golmech was able to walk right through that. The devs were kind enough to give you an extra life right before this, which is nice, they know you're at the end of the game. But yeah, take out this boss in less than 5 minutes, it's pretty easy to do. And then it's onto Andros' lair. Fox will go it alone, because he wants revenge. and it's also a wonderful callback to the original Star Fox where he did the same thing, but for no particular reason. We're graced with another tunnel where the lighting is perfect, and after flying in a straight line, collecting some upgrades, and listening to Andros taunt you, it's on to the evil scientist himself. He somehow altered his body so now he's just a giant head with 2 giant hands that have glowing weak spots on them. Keep in mind, you're alone here. There's no Peppy to give you hints, or Slippy to display Andros' health, or Falco to tell you how much you suck. The solution here is pretty obvious, especially if you played the original Super Nintendo game. But more importantly, it's all up to you to figure it out. Or you could just use a guide, I guess. Wait, no, for 3DS players it'd be more like, "What's up gamers, here's how to defeat Andros in Star Fox 64 3D, but don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to be up to date on more tips and tricks from Freezer, the Gaming Master 994, and don't forget to do a barrel roll Rufflecopter. Now to win, shoot Andros' hands, then his head, and that's it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome gaming videos just like this." It's that simple, but Andros does have some extra moves that will get you your first few attempts. But after enough experience, and especially if you have the hyper lasers, you'll never see these at all because he is a pretty easy boss to defeat. Though, that doesn't mean I don't love all the animations he has, like when you shoot a bomb into his mouth, he shakes his head uncontrollably and steam's coming out. Andros, for an evil genocidal maniac, he's got some cute animations. And you know, he's relatable. Look, when you shoot his eyes, he'll start rubbing his eyes with one hand. Look, he's just like me. That's what I'd do if someone shot my eyes, with a tiny laser that was relatively weak to me but still stung. Though defeating Andros isn't as simple as it sounds, because once we defeat what we think is Andros, he turns out to be a robot the whole time. So take down what's left and fly out of here. And that's your happy ending. The Lylat system is safe, though the credits with Andros is laughing. This kind of implies it's not as peaceful as I thought, huh? And that's because there's still the red route that we could have done to get to Venom. We have to go through Area 6. This is Venom's last defense, and by god is it more robust than Bolts ever was. Area 6 is my favorite level in the entire game, and it has been since I first came here. I love it so much, but it doesn't love me back. It's a very one-sided relationship. Much like some earlier space corridor stages like Meteor, we're getting closer to the target planet the whole time. The atmosphere is perfect even when there's no atmosphere. Andros is giving it all he's got, even more so than on Venom. Though thanks to it not having walls and tight squeezes, on expert mode I'd say this is a lot less difficult than Venom 1. Though for most players this is considered the hardest level in the game, and it's easy to see why. Your hands may hurt the entire time, but you have to endure it because these few minutes of fun are what keeps me coming back to this game more than anything else. You'll be mashing the buttons a lot, but it doesn't matter, this is so action-packed I can't stop loving it. The music is also perfect, which helps, but this is tightly paced action. Nothing lets up, and we get lots of back and forth chatter with the people defending the stage on our comms system. And they're worried because Star Fox is breaking on through every defense they have.
They're through the second line!
These guys are crazy!
Good old Andros even pops up here too, but he's less panicked than his underlings.
Ah, the son of James McCloud.
He's there to deliver the sense of threat the 2 more cartoonish villains can't do. I love everything about this level. Everything we go through, all the ships that are destroyed, the Great Fox assisting us, all the back and forth chatter. This level is perfect. I know some stages like Corneria and Meteor were refined until they were basically perfect enough for first time players, and I'm sure Area 6 didn't get nearly as much refinement, but it feels like it does. This is a perfectly scripted roller coaster ride. So what negative things can I say about Area 6? I don't like the name. It's the 6th area you'll go to on some runs. Cool. Was there not a better name out there? But after taking down a boss that shows us that circles can be imposing too, it's on to Venom. And honestly, I find Venom 2 more underwhelming than the first Venom I went to. There's no long trek to Andros' lair, we just start right here. And since Fox will go it alone, it makes me wonder why his friends even showed up. Thankfully they did, as Star Wolf is here one last time, and they're in new and improved ships, and their proficiency is increased with it. They no longer freak out at somersaults. they're much more imposing, you can't bomb them, and they will do everything they can to make sure you die. And it's not hard to see why they've improved so much. They have cybernetic enhancements. Well, not Wolf, he just has some band-aids on his face because he had a little ouchie. It's inferred by fans that they're like this because this takes place after their previous loss in Fortuna, but that doesn't really make sense unless you specifically went to Fortuna in your run before getting to Venom 2, which is possible but not something most players will do. And I feel like this was what the developers intended, and maybe this made sense in an earlier build, but as it stands now, I take it off face value and assume everyone just got cybernetic upgrades because they wanted to improve their skills, not because of any injuries. And Wolf just hurt himself in an unrelated incident before the stage. Maybe they all hung out on Fortuna waiting for you to arrive and they got caught in the explosion because they didn't leave on time. Or maybe the Sector X boob robot got them, or maybe it doesn't matter, it's just shorthand to show they're tougher and more experienced. Whatever it is, just kill them. And it's worth noting that their ships are meant to be much more powerful than the R-Wings, whereas before they were actually weaker than you. But other than a difficulty spike and the lack of a timer, this is basically Fortuna again, except the ground has these poles that are really easy to hit and I hate them and they're the bane of my existence on expert mode. But better ships or not, they're not too tricky to get, and then it's onto Andros' secret tunnel. This time it isn't a straight line, and it splits up into multiple pathways. Once again, I can't remember every combination here. But each one of them has things like bombs, laser upgrades, lives, or nothing, and it wastes your time and I hate when that happens. Andros will be at the end of this, and he's the exact same as before, and since I didn't get to cover it earlier, I have to say that both these Andros fights have one change I irrationally hate on 3DS. Andros' laugh doesn't echo the way it used to on N64. His facial animation was tied to that echo, and lasted as long as his laughing audio was present. But here on 3DS he does a short laugh, and then his face continues acting like he's still laughing, even though it's silent. It's been 13 years and there's no patch, and I'm still angry about this. Andros' voice is a downgrade in general, but I don't mind, I just want it to make visual sense too. Anyway, that's enough nitpicking that people don't care about. Defeat Andros, and then you'll find out it's not his real form. That's not because he's a robot, it's because he's a giant brain and eyes. They say it's his true form, but I think we're all kind of like that if you take away all our skin and muscles and bones. Defeating this boss is a bit of an anticlimax, however. It just never feels satisfying, it always lasts longer than I'd want to, because this is a boss about flying around while he teleports to try to avoid you, and he has a specific weak spot that isn't super easy to get to. Though thankfully it is better on 3DS because they clearly label his weak spot on the map, whereas before on N64 you just had to know which side of a giant bee that was always used to represent bosses was the weak spot. So yeah, the game does end on a bit of a whimper here, and it does leave me preferring Venom 1 overall, but we get a more climactic ending after Andros. In his final act he blows himself up to take you with him, and you're saved by James McCloud, Fox's father. He'll show you how to get out of here, any wrong moves and your monkey meat. The game leaves it open-ended if this was actually James or if this is Fox's imagination, and I kind of prefer it not getting a definitive answer. Maybe Fox found that bit of his father in him he didn't know he had. Regardless, Fox has proven himself for real, and he saved the Lylat system until the GameCube games established that no, there's still more saving that needs to happen. In a nice touch, the credits will even show Bill and Kat if they helped you out. But yeah, the ending is just a nice little moment where we get to see Slippy run with his little legs, and that's about it, they're the same credits as before. Though we do get an extra 3DS special credits just for the remake stuff, yeah, it's nice to see that credited. Huh, wow. Sorry, I just looked at the time. This is what happens when I'm allowed to hyperfixate on stages. It's a good thing I don't have an editor. God, I didn't even hyperfixate on the case yet. I should have done that earlier, but it would have scared people off. So just for you tenacious few still here, let's look at the case for this game. 3DS games have little holes in their cases, I'm not exactly sure why. I wonder if it's to reduce the amount of plastic without reducing the structural integrity, or maybe it's because they thought it looked nice, I don't know. Usually this never means anything. But Star Fox 64 3D put some character portrait in those empty holes and I appreciate it. Also, this got a full color manual in 2011, It even includes multiple pages of notes. It's like a relic from an earlier age. But we did lose some stuff in this transition to modern times. We can no longer move the logo around on the title screen like we could, so we don't get to see the characters' faces move around either. We can't even mess around with the solar system as much on the map. Before we could zoom in and out and move it everywhere, but here it's a lot more restricted. I'll settle for a more polished version of this game with gameplay and visual refinements, I suppose. I don't need all the fun, silly gimmicks that get boring after a minute. And, okay, Rob, fine, Jesus. This is my least favorite addition in the remake. Rob64 will repeatedly tell you to take a break, and I get it, this was Nintendo's thing back then, but I've never liked it, and I'm glad it faded away. It'll pop up whenever this game deems worthy, either between missions or more likely after you beat the game. All this does is make me feel self-conscious about playing this game in long sessions, and it's nice that we get a save feature now, but we didn't need this added to a game which was all about beating it in a single session. I get that Rob here is a little safety disclaimer, but I don't care about safety. I live in a country where a jellyfish the size of your thumbnail can kill you. Let me play my video game. And contrary to what I tell myself every time I boot up this game, there is more here than just the main campaign. I've already talked about Score Attack a bunch. It's the kind of addition that this game really needed. Unfortunately, I haven't used it enough, and I really should. The medals of the main game are here too, but now they're just silver? There are new gold medals in Score Attack, which are a significant challenge to get, and every time you do these, you're always forced back to the basic laser and 3 bombs, and you get no cat or bill to help you either, so it's a very traditional version of this stage. Going for golds is ridiculous. Like here in Sector X, I just played it one time for footage, and the normal medal goes for 150 hits. That's easy, and look, I got 197, it's still just a silver medal. But I suppose gold must be for like 200 hits or something. Never mind, if it's 240, a huge 90 step up from before. Though this is all kind of case by case, and some levels you'll be better at than others. Like in my one attempt at Aquas, I somehow got gold accidentally. Didn't even realize until I was checking the high scores at the end of this. And I feel like in the future I'm going to force myself to use this mode more, just for the bragging rights of going for all gold medals. But that hasn't happened yet at the time of recording. And in some ways this mode's less stressful, your teammates don't affect you, so Peppy dying on every level won't prevent you from getting a gold, thank god. If that was the case, I'd probably hate this mode. Score Attack also comes in 3DS difficulty, Nintendo 64 difficulty and Expert Mode difficulty, so players of all skill levels are supported. It really goes to show how this remake wanted to cater to everyone, more so than the original ever could. Unfortunately, it didn't cater to people who liked the multiplayer of the N64 having the unlockable Landmaster and On Foot modes. Because multiplayer is back, but it's all R-Wing all the time. It's kind of a letdown in some ways, but I also don't really play this mode much. It's local multiplayer only, and when this game was new, no one had 3DSs, so I couldn't play with anyone. And now it's been so long, no one cares about this game, so I'll never see this mode properly. They even added this weird gimmick where you can see the faces of your friends while you're playing, thanks to the 3DS's front cameras. You know, that's okay. It's weird because it's local multiplayer only, you could just look at your friend beside you, but nah, you need to look at it at a terrible frame rate. But it's a nice addition, I suppose, even if it doesn't make up for what was taken out here. Though, there are lots of improvements to this multiplayer mode as well. We get bots here, so I was actually able to play it by myself, and yeah, I could see this being a lot of fun if you have friends. The level complexity is a huge increase over what the Nintendo 64 had. Back then it was all flat ground or space, but here we have lots of space junk, of a robust metropolis of Corneria, of this volcano and Venom. Oh look, Macbeth! There's things on Macbeth that aren't a train track, it looks really nice. Once again, this makes me wish we could have gotten a whole new game by this team. In this multiplayer suite, we get Battle Mode, which is what you expect, be the last one remaining. There's also Score Attack and Time Attack, and well, I don't know what to say, do you want this video to go on forever? The multiplayer seems great, but from the perspective of someone who never got to play it with people, I don't really have much to say. And while it's improved over the original in lots of ways, there's also things missing, which is disheartening. But hey, I also never really got to play Star Fox 64's multiplayer either. Look, I'm sorry to end the video like this, but I have to at least acknowledge there is a multiplayer mode here, since this is what the game was all about to some folks back in the 90s. and this could be the make or break for people if they found out the Landmaster wasn't included anymore. And I'm sorry to the person watching this video waiting for that only to find out that I don't have much to say. Despite this deflating ending, this is one of my favourite games ever. I keep saying it, but it is. This is my favourite version of one of my favourite games. I'm going to keep saying the word favourite. Can you tell I love this game? This would be on my list of favourite games, my list of most important games ever, the list of games I'd take with me onto a desert island. Basically any kind of list someone would ask me, Star Fox 64 would be there. It's not a perfect game, because no game truly is. But to me, this is what gaming is all about, and it's infected my brain for years. From the opening minutes to the ending, I'm hooked. And whenever I beat it, I go back and do a second session. It's that addictive for me personally. This game is all about replayability, and I say that about lots of games, but this game really is the ideal replayable game. If you play this just once, and you get to the credits, you haven't seen most of the levels, so you have to replay to get a better idea of everything. And you'll notice in that second session, you've refined your skills, you've gotten better. Maybe you were able to stop Fortuna from blowing up, and look, now you're on a different pathway, and there's more levels you've got to see, so you keep replaying it over and over, and you become me. It's a great feeling. I know it sounds scary, but it's great. The gradual way a new player gets better and unlocks more of this game's content, it's a fascinating thing to watch unfold. Whereas other games that you tell people are replayable, they'll say no, why do I care, I saw the whole game anyway. Star Fox doesn't let you do that. This is the anti-play-it-once game. Well, until the GameCube happened, but I'm not going to complain about those games here, you're allowed to love them. Those GameCube games did do something that 64 wasn't able to do. They continued the story. Star Fox 64 being the remake of the first SNES game, scrapping the new characters and story from the cancelled second game, well, it wasn't a big deal back then. This was an era people only really played games like this for Twitch action. But the idea that a Star Fox game could be about something more than just Corneria to Venom with his team of 4, that's something we can't undo. Pandora's box has been opened. The 3 story sequels to Star Fox 64 all furthered the story in lots of ways that let new fans love them. And we've hit the reset button since then twice somehow. Once literally with Star Fox 64 3D coming out, obviously, then again with Star Fox Zero, a game that is once again using the same basic story from the original game in 64. And that left a sour taste in people's mouths. And inevitably, when we get another Star Fox game, it'll more than likely be another reboot with this exact same story again. Let's see how long until I'm proven wrong. You can't please everyone, the Star Fox fanbase is incredibly fractured. But for me personally, ignoring all that and just focusing on what I love, Star Fox 64 3D pleases me. This is the perfect Star Fox game, minus all the nitpicks I mentioned. I don't need a new story or new characters or anything. That'd be nice, I'm definitely open to them, but right now, all I need is my vehicle to move forward and to have a button to mash until my fingers fall off. It turns out making a really long video takes a really long time to edit, which is why this sounds completely different because I had to make a last minute change. It's almost December, so it's time for my PC December video. Get out of here, the next handheld video that I had planned that I've been working on for months. You're not coming out until the new year. Once again, I'm picking one of my favourite games ever, and another classic from the 90s, and this is Thief the Dark Project. Well, technically it's Thief Gold, the version with slightly more content of dubious quality, but hey, it's still Thief 1. A landmark stealth game that to this day is unrivaled in terms of making you feel like a sneaky little guy, well, outside its sequel, which is also a great game and it's better than this in most ways. And this is all with the caveat that everyone here looks like an ugly polygonal mess. So return to hear me gush about a game that I love. This series really needs to come back. Oh fuck, never mind, no, just stay dead, please.